Well, this is terrific and really exciting. This is back to school, back to work, back to everything. Our first, I guess, in-person and virtual standard speaker series. We are beyond thrilled to have Seth Meyers, Emmy Award-winning writer, host of Late Night with Seth Meyers, executive producer of The Amber Ruffin Show, documentary Now. Just got to watch his first Netflix stand-up comedy, which was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to get to a little bit of the content. I hope I don't spoil it for everybody else because you need to go watch it, Lobby Baby.
It came out like 2.5 years ago. If people haven't seen it, I'm fine with you spoiling it.
I've started off with a bang here, as you can all see.
Can I just say, can I interrupt you already?
Please, that makes it.
I just got back. Last week was the Emmys, and I was nominated twice and lost twice. And I believe I've been nominated upwards of high 20s.
I got to 29.
Yeah,
I actually got to 29.
So I've won once.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it's only worth it because people like you say Emmy winning. All you need is one. And after that, there's no additional value to the second Emmy.
You know what? I'm going to make you feel better. If you've won an Emmy out here, please raise your hand.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, okay.
All right,
so
great.
one still takes the show. And for most of you, I'm sure know 13 seasons on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
9 as head writer. 8 anchoring Weekend Update, which was my childhood favorite. And so we're just absolutely thrilled to have you.
Gotcha.
And we're going to do this in an easy way where I'm going to start talking, and I will hopefully end talking as soon as I possibly can, so everybody here and on video gets to ask you a few questions. But maybe for the group, start with how you got interested in comedy. How'd you get started in comedy?
My parents loved comedy. My dad especially loved comedy, and he introduced comedy to my brother and I at very age-inappropriate times. He loved Richard Pryor and Steve Martin and SNL and Monty Python, and we started watching that when we were way younger than most people. Yeah, we should have been. But it's good, and it's interesting now that I have kids because I feel we're maybe even a little bit more sensitive as to how comedy has aged. I don't think that was the issue then, right? Growing up in the 80s, stuff from the 70s was not massively different.
Right.
And so it was great. And because of that, I never liked comedy for kids. I remember having friends who liked things like Full House and knowing the whole time that show was hot garbage, you know? I was just like, that's just for kids. Why do you think that's funny? Don't you know that's just for kids?
Right.
But yeah, so, and the other thing was, I've said this before, but my mom is a very beautiful woman, and my dad's fine. But she laughs, to this day, she laughs at everything he ever said. And I think my brother and I realized at a very young age that you can do a lot better than you should if you can be funny. And it incentivized us.
I think most of us feel like our family should be part of comedy sketches, but you've actually gotten to feature your family in your comedy.
Yeah.
How's that work?
Well, so the reason my family started being on our show is the highest rated show of the year for Late Night with Seth Meyers and The Tonight Show, it should be noted, is Thanksgiving because NBC has the late Thanksgiving football game.
Right.
So that is the highest rated primetime show that NBC has all year. And then there's the local news, and then there's The Tonight Show, and then there's Late Night with Seth Meyers. And so the ratings are really high because people have eaten a lot of turkey and they fall asleep with the TV on. And so the Nielsen's don't know that they're asleep, but our ratings are outstanding.
That's fantastic.
But it's very hard to get guests, obviously, to do the Thanksgiving show. And so our first season, we decided to have my parents and my brother be guests on the show. And they were very funny. And they've done it every year since. And people always say, are you still going to have them on? And at this point, it would be impossible to tell my parents we're moving on. If I told them we've come up with a different idea, I think it would make for a very cold Thanksgiving.
Turkey.
Yeah.
Exactly right. SNL. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, I've always, as a pure consumer, been fascinated by just decades of talent.
Yeah.
And Lorne in particular, and what I don't know about, but love to hear about, his leadership style. How does somebody like that consistently bring on such amazing talent and keep them motivated and manage them? What are the secrets of Lorne, and what of those did you take with you?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about SNL, certainly by the era that I started on the show, is your motivation is you already work at an iconic place.
Right.
I think it's a little bit like if you played for the Yankees, would you need someone to remind you played for the Yankees? At some point, you know, the environment gives away how important it is. And I remember when I first started SNL, I walked down the hallway, and there's a headshot of everybody. The headshot from when they got hired, so real bad headshots of very famous people. And when you first walk down the hallway after you get hired, and you're on cloud nine, and you're walking, and you're just looking, and it's Eddie Murphy and Will Ferrell, and you just think to yourself, oh my God, I'm going to be the next Eddie Murphy or the next Will Ferrell or the next Mike Myers. And then after a week of working there, you start seeing the faces of people you've never seen again. Right. And you realize, oh no, there's a lot of ways out of here. Yeah. And so the fear is a huge motivator. Unfortunately, I think that it would probably be better if fear isn't what drove people at SNL, but everyone I talk to, even when I talk to people, and my era has produced some incredibly successful people. Sure. You know, again, I was just at the Emmys, and, you know, I presented with Amy Poehler and Bill Hader and Jason Sudeikis are there with their shows, and, you know, I was at a table with Molly Shannon and Vanessa Bayer. So it continues to be this feeder to, you know, just media at large. But everybody, and when you talk to everybody, they're always, you know, even the people you think were crushing it the whole time, they were terrified the whole time.
Well, fear becomes a topic that we'll come back to.
Yeah. But Lorne, I would say Lorne is interesting because it's not a very easy to mimic management style. But the one thing he has, which I think will be the hardest thing to replace, should he ever choose to move on, is he just has an eye for talent and taste. Sure. Taste is irreplaceable because you just to have a taste that has sort of moved through eras of comedy and sort of had its finger on the pulse of it. But the thing he wants, and I will say when we hired a staff, it's what we're looking for, is self-starters. Sure. He never has succeeded by telling people what they need to do. But he can hire people based on their... One of the cool things about auditioning for SNL versus auditioning for a sitcom, when you audition for a sitcom, they give you the lines and they say, go in and, you know, we'll read the other half of the scene and you do your lines. Whereas at SNL, they just say, do 5 minutes. You can do whatever you want. Right. You can do stand-up if you're a stand-up. You can do impressions if you're an impressionist. You can do short sketches. And I think it's a really smart thing because they look at what you do with 5 minutes and they can sort of game it out a little bit to say, is this person going to figure out how to make things work?
You referenced it a little bit, but sort of how comedy has changed over the last number of decades. I mean, talk about that, the role of comedy today, and in particular, what feels like a very politicized environment.
I don't think so.
No,
I think we all agree.
I'm alone on that one.
I was walking over here thinking, isn't it cool we all agree? I mean, it's interesting, you know, one of the things that, I don't know, I feel like the biggest shift as far as late night, SNL's always been political. I think that's one of the early hooks Lorne figured out in the way the show is structured. The cold open tends to work best when it's about that week specifically. And then the monologue, which is next, is about that host specifically. And then you can sort of get into the different tastes of the different writers and performers. But if the show begins, because it's live, being about what's happening in the world and who's there, it feels important to the moment. And late night was always, I think, adjacent to the news, but maybe not about the news in the same way. And I think that shift really, you have to give credit to Jon Stewart, The Daily Show. Right. Before that, no one was doing what now many of us do, which is sort of a deep dive as opposed to, you know, 3 light jokes in the monologue. So it's changed that way, but I think one of the reasons it survives is there's a market for it. People, especially when the news is harder and harder to watch, a good supplement. I don't think anybody should use us as a first news source. It's not about supplement, though. I feel like you watch the news and then it's maybe cathartic to watch.
You need a base primer before you go
don't in. Like. Yeah. I mean, even I'm Seth Meyers, and if someone says I heard Seth Meyers say it, I know they're a dummy. I'm like, all right.
Is there any response? Like, do you think of yourself as a news maker? I mean, is it?
No. Right. I think every now and then we make news, but I don't think of myself as a news maker. I don't know if high school yearbooks have superlatives, and there's class clown.
Right.
Ours had class clown and best sense of humor. Okay. And I won best sense of humor, which I feel like is very much the one who sits in the back of the class and whispers to the person next to him, the class clown's not that funny. And so I kind of feel like other people do things that we comment on. So I think we're better when we have takes on the news as opposed to trying to make it.
Is it harder to sort of, tell jokes and come up with content in a more kind of hyper-polarized world?
Again, when we have hiatus weeks, that's when it's hard.
Right.
Because I still follow the news,
Sure.
and without the show to sort of process it, I tend to just mutter to myself in the street.
Right.
And so I always say, we hope the show's cathartic to watch. It's definitely cathartic to do, no matter what's happening in the news.
Right.
Obviously, there are things that happen that are so horrifying. They're the days I feel the least equipped to talk about it. Things like mass shootings, when those happen, and it feels so conspicuous to ignore it as well, but you don't have new things to say.
Sure.
And as a comedian, as opposed to say a social scientist, you don't have a new solution. And those days are the hardest because there's most political things you can try to find a way to let the tension out, but with that, there's really nothing.
No, it just feels like in such a hypercharged environment, adding a little levity to even things that maybe don't deserve levity is something that everybody's looking for, and we're all glad you can do it.
Yeah, no, it's
no pressure.
And the other thing, the longer you do the show, I think when you start doing a talk show, a lot of your audience are people who came because they wanted to see a talk show.
Sure.
And then they start coming to see your talk show, and because they know what they're coming for, it gives you a little bit more freedom to be the most authentic version of yourself. And that's been a great progression of the show, is not having to I felt like when I started I was play acting a talk show host,
right.
And now I just get to be myself, and also incidentally I'm a talk show host.
How do you stay on top of all the news? I mean, how do you and your team, it must be an endless process.
I can't, when people say how do you get through writer's block, I have the best solution now, which is I have 14 writers, and it's their problem. Because for years at SNL I was a head writer, and I had to carry the burden of every problem we ever had. Yeah. I had to stay late and solve, and now I'm embarrassed to say I'll walk in on a Monday morning. We do this thing, which is sort of the first act of our show called A Closer Look. It's sometimes 10, 12 minutes. I'll walk in and read a first draft as the way other people read the newspaper. I'm like, let's see what happened today. And then my job, as I've constructed it, is just to add jokes and make trims and put it in my voice. And that's so much easier than what I used to do.
Well, I guess
I never have to look at a blank page. I never have to say, open on, which is every writer's nightmare.
And when you joined late night, I mean, I imagine it's sort of a long-standing format and tradition. Mm-hmm. How'd you think about sort of innovating that platform, and was it scary, and did you have to
It's so embarrassing how little I thought about innovation when I started. I just wanted to survive, and it speaks to, mediocre might be a little bit harsh, but basic the show was when I started, because I aimed for competence. Right. Which I don't think nobody wants to turn on the television and say, let's watch a guy be fine. But that's what I wanted. I wanted to prove I could be a late night talk show host. And I was so focused on doing what I thought a late night talk show host should do, right, that I forgot the more important thing was to do the things I would want to see.
Sure.
And that's why I started doing a standing monologue, because I thought, oh, that's what they do, and I want to show everybody I can do it standing up. And then, 18 months in, I went into my producer's office and I said, can we just start where I'm sitting at the desk? He's like, I think everybody would like that. I'm in a name drop. Can I name drop?
You please can.
I saw Howard Stern after I sat down at the desk, and he said, I enjoy the show so much more now that you're sitting in the beginning. And I said, I enjoy it too. He goes, I don't care what you enjoy. I don't care. I just know that I enjoy it more. But it was so funny because standing and telling a monologue, I know how to do stand-up. I know how to hold a microphone and tell a joke.
Yeah.
Not holding a microphone and telling a joke, and you just realize how everything about Johnny Carson that feels like, a hand in the pocket and doing this, it's just it's not a way people actually talk. You just have to develop it. Because it's so weird to be like, did you see this? Did you read about this? All these things that seem hacky, you have to do them. Otherwise, you're just a crazy person who doesn't have a microphone and is just telling people jokes about the news.
Right.
So it was very nice for me to center myself. And by the way, it does speak to maybe how the format hasn't had a ton of innovation. That sitting down, people were like, tell us more about how you came to that conclusion. It was a massive sea change in late night.
So then COVID happens.
Yeah.
Tell us about sort of the evolution of the show.
I had nothing to do with it.
Isolation. No,
It was so
battle testing the platform.
Yeah, it really was. It was, the silver lining of it was I did the show in my attic for 3 months, and I had to do everything. I had to do camera, sound, lights, and I didn't have an audience.
Right.
And it was nuts, but stripping the show down to its studs, is that the expression?
Yeah.
I don't build things.
It is.
I should also stress, I want you all to know this, I have no idea what your company does.
Okay.
And I've had it explained to me,
is the
and
actual part we will edit out.
does feel like what people tell me you do should be more than one company. And so you had to make these creative innovations based on circumstances that allowed us to find the best version of the show. And one of the things is when you're in a room with 180 people, which is what we have in our studio, it's impossible as a performer not to look past those 180 people, even though 1 million people are watching from home. Like that 180 shouldn't be as important as you make them, but just your ego as a performer is making them have a good time. And over the course of the night, you can sort of adjust based on who they are. Whereas being in an attic, you just are consistent to what you think is funny. And it turns out the people who watch you every night enjoy that consistency. And so I feel that over the course of that, when it ended up being 20 months before we had an audience back in the studio, we really sort of set what we wanted to accomplish every night, and the people who watch us at home enjoyed that. And they, for the first time, really knew what they were getting. They liked what we were getting. A lot of it was letting them behind the scenes. Again, going back to when I started, I felt like I white-knuckled through a monologue. I think that at 12:37 on a weeknight, people don't want to watch somebody be super stressed out when they tell jokes. I think you wanted a little bit of SNL. SNL is Saturday night. It's dangerous.
Right.
Part of tuning in. People watch SNL as a group. Like growing up, I would get together with my friends. No one ever gets together at 12:37 to watch Seth Meyers. Nobody's like, hey, come on over. I'm having people. It's Wednesday.
We will start.
Oh, yeah.
We will start.
And so the show became a lot easier. One thing was everybody watching at home was going through the same thing I was, right? COVID was the consistent. Nobody tuned in one night and was like, why the fuck is he in his attic? It wasn't like, because he lost his mind. And I think if I'd gone to the network and said, I think to freshen up the show, I should go do it in an attic for 3 months, I think they would have shown me the door. But it was cool to be able to find the things we loved about it. And then we went back in the studio for a year without an audience, and our crew was the only audience. And now, I have people approach me all the time who can tell, they know the different laughs of the different crew members because it was just me and 8 people. And it was, I would never want to go through it again, but I am glad that when we came out, we really liked our show in March of 2020, but I think we liked it more when it was over.
Both on a personal level then with regard to late night, what did you take with you from that experience, from the COVID experience? Is there parts of your show now that you think have evolved because of that experience or the way you know the audience?
So one thing was I realized I'm doing a show, it's just me and a screen, and a lot of people are watching them in a screen. And they're watching it, sometimes in bed, in a place where, not that you're vulnerable, but that you're comfortable. And so I found comfort in that too. And because it was a time where we all felt so anxious, there was a nice connection. And I've tried to hold on to the idea of what I think that connection is with us and our audience, which I didn't think of a lot. I had a very funny thing happen, which is early on in COVID, I was lamenting not having a live audience. Is so weird because with a live audience, you kind of can tell how a show's going on any given night. And someone said, "Oh, there is a place you can go to find out what people think about you, and it's called the YouTube comment section." And you guys knew what was waiting for me there. Because they employ a real straight talk in the YouTube comment section, and I was very proud of myself that I was doing everything by myself. Internally, I thought the people watching at home were thinking, well, this is really cool that this guy is doing light, sound, everything. And instead I went to the YouTube comment section and multiple people said, this show looks like shit. And someone said, are they filming it on an iPad camera? Which really hurt my feelings because I was. So then I went and got an HD camera, and I was so excited, learned how to use it over the course of a weekend, and then that Monday filmed the show in HD. So proud of myself. That Tuesday morning, I ran to the YouTube comment section to receive what I assumed would be accolades for this incredible technological leap the show took. And instead, the only review for the HD show was, you look like shit.
Right back to the iPad.
Yeah, exactly. Right back to that. It turns out when you're 48 and doing your own makeup for the first time, like, what happened to him?
But they liked your eyes.
They liked my eye. My eyes popped. But no, you want that. You're like, oh, I understand why Barbara Walters used that filter. You want that real forgiving iPad lens.
Zoom before Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
What's sort of been, one of your most memorable guests? Tell us something that surprised you.
I mean, so February of this year was the 40th anniversary of the franchise. And we reached out to David Letterman to see if he wanted to come on. And very on brand for Dave Letterman. He had no idea it was the 40th anniversary of Late Night. But he was flattered, and he came. And it was such a trip. Because he's, I think like a lot of people here, first person I ever saw do a show at 12:30. And when I started watching late night television, I have a great appreciation for Carson now, but Carson felt like your dad's late night host, and Letterman felt like the dangerous one. He felt like your uncle, your weird uncle's late night host. And
before the beard.
Yeah, exactly, before the beard. And you also are acutely aware, based on everything you know about David Letterman, that the last thing he wants is for you to gush all over him and just to tell him how much he meant to you. He's very Midwestern in his aversion to receiving praise. And so even though in your head it's the biggest deal in the world that David Letterman is coming back and spending his 40th anniversary with you, you have to be a good talk show host. You have to have an engaging conversation. It's the only thing he'll value. Is to be authentic as opposed to fanboying out over the moment. So that was really nice. And during the show, before we have music, it takes a minute to set up the band. I'll go and do a Q&A with the audience. And since Dave was still there, I said, do you want to come take questions with me? And I think, by the way, like he misses it, like the way I'll miss it. And he said yes, and it was really wonderful because, first of all, I think he's a different person now. I think he has a real appreciation for the gig, maybe a less anxiety about the day-to-day of it. And it was really cool to just watch him, first of all, be incredibly quick and funny while he took questions for her. I will say that night, most of the questions were for him. For him. Yeah. When I said, does anybody have any questions for me or David Letterman?
Yeah. Sort of how I feel right now. Yeah. We spent a lot of time talking about sort of old media versus new media. And, curious how you see this continuing to evolve now. I mean, what's sort of the future of
It's so interesting because I did say to Dave, when we were talking backstage, I said, I think TV changed more since I got this job to today than it did from when you got the job to when I got the job. Sure. I think there was a real, even though it felt maybe like tumultuous, you look at it now and it was really consistent. Sure. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not good at predicting the future, and I take great solace in that because no one asked me to. Or no one depends on me to be right, I should say. I don't know which way it's going to go. I do think it's going to change. I don't know what the future of network television is. I'm very happy my career started when it did. I'm 20 plus years in the building using the same ID. Sure. That's another thing. I feel like I look the same as when I got the job. Yeah. And when the security guys see my ID, they're like, whoa. Yeah. The nice thing is I feel like I got in at a great time. I've gotten to work on 2 legacy shows for the entirety of my career. And as to where it goes next, I mean, I will say it's also one of the reasons why I think it's important for myself personally to diversify I used a business word for you. To diversify. But like that's why it's like even though it could be very easy to just do a talk show. Sure. It's important for me to go do stand up or work on other shows because you never know. None of these things are forever.
So Lobby Baby, I'm sure all of you have already seen it, but if you haven't, you will. Yeah. Without ruining the punchline, you got to give us a little bit of a glimpse into Lobby Baby?
Well, Lobby Baby is what we call our middle son because he was born in the lobby of our apartment building by accident. And the one thing I say to my wife all the time is, you gave me the gift of a beautiful, healthy baby boy, but even better than that, you gave me 10 minutes of material.
Content.
Just content. And she says she was so mad that day because, one, she had a baby in a lobby. And based on what I know about childbirth, that's not the best place.
No.
But I have this bad habit of I'm always writing in my head, and when I do that, my lips move. I talk to myself. And she said while she was holding our newborn child, she just saw me in the corner of me, and she goes, "Stop writing."
That's very funny.
It was great.
And
then,
funny.
I mean, I say this in the special, but it's true. As you know, we still had to get in the ambulance, which is that's part of the ripoff. So we get in the ambulance with a baby, which was like basically to show them they're like, "Yep, it's a baby, head on home." But as we were walking out, like, because we called 911 and there were firemen and policemen, and it was a whole thing. And also, it's a way smaller lobby. When you say New York lobby,
By the way,
I think people, it's really small.
So you and your doorman are rather close now.
So close. And one of the firemen walked by, and I didn't know if anybody had recognized me. Obviously, it was very chaotic, and it wasn't as though I was expecting the star treatment. But a fireman walked by and goes, "I guess you got your monologue for tonight." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I totally do, dude." And with our first, they were both of our kids were born on a Sunday, and when Ash was born, it was also a really good story. Not as good, obviously, in the now, but he was born on Sunday. I took Monday off. I went on Tuesday and talked about my son's birth on the show on Tuesday, and then Axel was born in the lobby on a Sunday. And Sunday, I was in the hospital, and I just said to Lexi, "I gotta go in tomorrow." She goes, "You're allowed to go in." Yeah, she knew she would be the hero. Yeah. Although this is the other. The part of the story that she is less inclined to let me tell is this is what an alpha my wife is. She had a baby in the lobby of our building, and then we in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, she said to me, "Write the head of the co-op board and say that we'll buy a new rug." And this is because she didn't like the rug. And so she's such an alpha that while even in the moment of like, I can't believe it, yeah, but what other things, she's like, "Oh wait, I can get another thing out of this."
I love it.
And so I did. And then by the way, they immediately wrote back like, "Oh my God, we heard the story. That's amazing. Axel will always be a part of this building. Don't worry about it. We're going to take care of the rug." And so then, again, the next day, she said, did you write them? I'm like, "I did." They said they're gonna take care of it. And she goes, "How did you ask?" I'm like, can we move rug to next week?
That's amazing. Well, the progression of the birth stories is some of my favorite because I guess your first Ash was a near Lobby Baby.
Yeah, Ash was almost in the Uber, made it like 5 minutes before he was born. Axel was the lobby, and then Addie, our third, was on purpose in the bathtub.
Very understandable.
Upstairs. Yeah.
Very understandable.
If you could only make it 0.1% of the way to the hospital, definitely stay home.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So you recently added New York Times bestseller
Yep.
author to your list. So we read this in my house. I'm not scared, you're scared.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter Maud's here.
Did you like it, Maud? All right, good. Thank you, Maud. I needed that.
Who also has a brother named Axel.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a lot here for all of us. Maybe tell us a little bit. First, what made you write a kid's book?
I'd been approached to write a kid's book, and I didn't really have any ideas, but then it was early in the pandemic, and I was talking with this wonderful editor, and she sort of pointed me towards the idea of fear. And it really is interesting because I think you have your own ideas about fear, and then it all changes when you have kids. Because there's this thing where your first instinct as a parent is to tell your kids, "Don't worry, you have nothing to be afraid of." But half the time you want your kids, you want that internal fear to help them not run into traffic or not, climb up to the top of the jungle gym before they have the agility to not fall right off it.
Sure.
So it was a book. I wanted to write, two characters, one who was fearless and one who was terrified, and have them sort of come together. And hopefully, I also wanted a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
And mostly, though, it was pure ego. I just wanted my kids to know I could write a book. They don't watch my show a lot.
Do they think you're funny?
They think I'm all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think they're fully
Bought in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's starting to happen that other kids are telling them
That's
that
funny.
not even that he's funny. It's like he's on TV.
Yeah. Which is the thing.
It's a thing. That counts for something. Yeah.
I don't know. I love the book. I mean, when I read it, with my kids, I think the thing that I wanted them to hear the most of, you're not really sure what you're capable of until you really have no choice.
Yeah.
And I think that was sort of the most important takeaway is, I remember, kind of growing up and hearing about my great-grandfather and his experience being a kid effectively coming to the States from Poland, and me not really comprehending how does a 14-year-old who speaks no English and literally doesn't have any money, how does that happen? And I guess the answer is you don't know what you can do till you have no choice.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That was sort of one of the major takeaways.
I'm very glad you enjoyed it.
No, I did enjoy it, and it wasn't really for me. So
yeah.
It's a little bit of a side benefit.
I will say, I did want a book that parents wouldn't hate if they had to read multiple times. That's the worst as a parent.
100%.
Yeah.
We have those.
Yeah.
A lot of those.
I mean, Goodnight Moon is 16 pages.
That one I'll
and
read
it feels like a million. Yeah. If my kids want to, we're starting over again, right? Because now we have a 1-year-old, so you got to read Goodnight Moon again. It's so fast. It's over before you start, and yet when you have to read it, you're like, oh, I hate this book so much.
The Little Engine That Could.
Little Engine That Could, though, always chokes me up a little bit.
Yeah,
there's something about the little, although it's a little bit longer than you. I swear to God, it's 5 different trains before you're like, we know what's coming. Get to the little. Yeah.
We know how it ends.
Yeah,
exactly right. Well, before we get into Q&A, I know you've accomplished so much. You've been in so many different. What's the thing that stands out that you can remember doing, and in the midst of doing it, you're sitting there thinking, I can't believe I'm actually having this experience. I'm talking to this person. I'm in this place.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird now because the historical significance of the night has changed a great deal. Because in 2011, I did the White House Correspondents' Dinner where Donald Trump was there, and President Obama made fun of him. I made fun of him, and everybody said, "Ha, that's the end of him."
Yeah. The rest is history.
With that said, President Obama told jokes first. I told jokes after. I felt really good about it. And I kind of couldn't believe it, right? I couldn't believe...
Was this a Saturday?
Yes. It was a Saturday. And I kind of couldn't... it was also a really special weekend because you bring your parents.
Sure.
You get a tour of the White House. They get to meet the Obamas beforehand. It's black tie. And it, when it was over, I kind of got whisked up to my hotel room and I was waiting for my wife, who was my then girlfriend, and my parents. And then a bunch of SNL people came. I was still at SNL all the time. But my dad is a really funny guy, and he's also a really tough judge. He never gave it to me. He never gave praise when it wasn't earned. And whereas my mom thinks everything I do is perfect. It's a very nice balance. But I remember it's one of the things I'll remember about my dad. It'll be maybe the thing I'll remember the most. But he walked in, and a bunch of other people were in, and he walked in, and he just went. And it was just, I remember thinking, that was...
Big moment.
Because there was the stakes were the highest they've ever been.
Sure.
Even though it's weird, the stakes were the highest there's been. It was what channel was it on?
Sure.
C-SPAN. And it only really feels like the world is watching, because of course it's not. The Super Bowl. But it kind of is. And I will say, it also was... I do think it was maybe, not the first, but one of the dominoes that led to me getting late night. I think that, a lot of NBC people were there that night, and I think it was the kind of, when you can kind of hold your own with the president.
That's a big crowd.
And I think they think, we should make sure this guy kind of hangs around our family for a while. So,
well, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Before I get to Q&A, I'm curious in your thoughts about how you sort of showcased your own writers, your own staff in a very, very kind of public way. Tell us a little bit about Jokes Seth Can't Tell.
Well, Jokes Seth Can't Tell was just an idea. We have Jenny, who's a lesbian and Puerto Rican, and Amber, who's black, and they're these two women who write for the show, and they're great writers, but they wrote jokes for me all the time that I would say, guys, if I can't say these jokes, like these are making fun of black women and lesbians, like I can't, like it's just the delivery system's not going to work. And so then they wrote up this idea called Jokes Seth Can't Tell, which is exactly that. I tell the setups to these jokes, and they tell the punchlines, and it is. What I love about it is a reminder. Like, I don't think that everybody gets to tell all the jokes. I do think sometimes it really matters who's telling the jokes, sure. And so to be able to have those voices out lets you. It widens the topics that you can cover, and they're also so charming. They get away with jokes that I would be literally carried out of the building.
Well, listen, I get the cover story, but I love the idea of just sort of showcasing your own team and
we're really lucky. We hired writers in the beginning that we thought could also perform, and they have rewarded us with that. That plan has been rewarded because in their times, we did that the night Letterman was there, right. And he was saying, I think he could tell. Oh, that's how you can do it.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool. Well, terrific. Now, maybe open up to folks in the room and folks online with some questions. We'll start with the room.
This is not planted.
You have a...
Not planted. I have a real question. Thank you so much. I realized from your special that now, Minneapolis, St. Paul plays like some sort of a special part for you.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how New York City as like a backdrop for this whole kind of history and your career.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting raising kids in the city who, when they go to the suburbs, are like, whoa! Because I grew up in the suburbs and all I ever wanted to do was live in the city. I had the best possible reason to move here, which is I got hired for SNL, which was crazy. And then 3 weeks after I moved here was 9/11. And so then, I lived downtown. And so I was here for, obviously, as bad a day as New York's ever had, but also for that incredible year after where you sort of you realized what an incredible place it was. And it was also, you realized in that way that when you read books about historical periods, how some people lived through them, you realize, this is a moment in history to be here right now and to watch the spirit of this place. And then just getting to be, you realize that New York, the reason everybody knows it is because of so much television comes out of New York. And so you get jokes about the subway, even though if you've never been on the subway, because David Letterman told them. Or you get jokes about, Ed Koch because you saw a sketch on SNL years ago. And so it was really cool that you sort of get to do comedy here. And you also don't have to feel like you're doing sort of local comedy that no one will get. There's a hunger for it everywhere, and so the longer you're in New York, the more you can talk about New York. Even when people know that you're a Red Sox fan, and they still count you because you live here. So.
Who else here?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a comment about some of your early setbacks. Sorry. Maybe can you comment about some of your early setbacks and how you overcame it?
Yeah. So I would say the worst time I had career-wise, and again, I was very lucky to have breaks early on. So, I was an improviser in Chicago, and then I got to work at this wonderful comedy theater in Amsterdam, started by Chicago guys, and then I came back and was doing, everything was happening at the right path where I didn't hit any hurdles until I got on SNL, and all of a sudden looked around the room and realized, I felt the funniest person in every room I was in, and now I'm not even close. And I'm like, I don't even know who the least funny person here is, which I think means it might be me. And so that was my sort of compare and despair years, where you think it's going to be amazing to work with Will Ferrell until they're deciding if they're going to do your sketch or Will Ferrell's. And so it was really a rough time. And then there was the wave of legends who were there when I started. And then after I was there, this new wave of guys came in. Andy Samberg and Bill Hader and Jason Sudeikis and Fred Armisen and Will Forte, all of whom are to this day as good of friends as I have. But I always thought to myself, I want to write for them more than I want to write for me, and I'm invested in writing for me, so I can only imagine how the other writers feel. And so that was this really awful time where I don't think I projected it, but I felt a lot of jealousy. I felt like it wasn't going to work out, and it was really heartbreaking to think I was going to be at SNL and it wasn't going to work out. And then, I found this path into being the head writer, and then getting, after Tina left, I got to do Weekend Update, and that, then all of a sudden I felt like I had a home. And I remember Andy Samberg, who is really, truly one of the best people I know. He wrote this sketch that I felt like was a one-off, not a recurring sketch, where he was a kid who won a contest to be an NFL, like the color commentary booth of an NFL game. And after every play, he said, "That'll move the chains," no matter what happened. And everybody else got frustrated, and it was fine. So then, like a month later, he comes into my room and he said, "I think we're going to do another That'll Move the Chains." And I went, "Another?" Because I was like, how are you going to do another one? Right. I feel like you guys got everything you could out of it. And he just turned to me and goes, "We don't all have Update every week." And I was like, okay. Because that was the great thing about doing Update is you just got to know, it wasn't going to go great every week, but you knew. And that, even the biggest stars at SNL, even Kristen Wiig, even Bill Hader, something had to break their way for them to be on TV every week. So that was... When I got that, I was on the other side of it. Andy also once said to me, like, "I'm glad you got cool once you got everything you ever wanted."
It's all tough.
Yeah. What a cool journey of self-discovery.
We're going to take a question that was virtually submitted. For anyone who's watching virtually, you can submit additional questions via the Zoom. But one that has come in is, was it hard to keep your composure on SNL? Was there a cast member that made everyone break the most during the live shows?
Such a good question. So I kept my composure pretty well in sketches. There is a sketch that didn't even air. It was cut from Dress that's on the Best of Will Ferrell DVD called Old Prospector, where we all broke. And I have no shame about that. But it was interesting when I hosted Weekend Update, because usually I would say nothing good comes out of sort of audience testing stuff. Right. But they did a round of audience testing after my first year of Weekend Update, and someone said, "Hey, I don't like that Seth doesn't like the guests, because I used to be mad when things went wrong, which is all that ever happens is it goes wrong." And I realized, oh, that's right. I should just enjoy how bad things are going. Right. And so, for example, with Stefan, with Bill Hader, like people said, how did you keep from breaking? And I always said, I'm pretty sure I did break. I let my persona enjoy him as much as everybody else did.
Do you do a Bill impersonation?
I don't do a great Bill. Hey, how are you? Yeah. I do a great Will Forte. It's like, oh, hey, Seth. It's really good. You don't know him like I do.
Better than mine.
Yeah. Oh, you were doing your Will before this. It was awful. Yeah.
Who else?
Will you pass it to Beth?
Beth.
So SNL is obviously a place for young people.
Yeah.
And I mean, you guys are up all night, all throughout the week. How does Lauren do it every year? And how long do you think he'll be able to do it? And if he stops doing it, who do you think should get it?
One thing I'll say, it's so true. It's the worst hours in the world. And even though I do my show 40 weeks a year and SNL is 20 weeks a year, everybody who leaves SNL immediately looks 5 years younger. Everybody looks great because you're not supposed to keep those hours. I mean, it's bad enough in college when you pull all-nighters, but at least you're young. And I will say, I think one of the ways Lauren maintains it is he's the last guy to come into the office and the first guy to leave. But he's just a night owl. He really is a night owl. And, all jokes aside, I think he just loves it so much. I don't foresee him leaving. I can't imagine that he would one day say, I will have, my life will be fuller if I'm not doing this week to week. I can imagine him doing it maybe in concert with someone else who's come up with him over the years. I think there'd be great options for him, but I would have a lot of questions about how this show moves forward without someone who has his taste. Also, it's very helpful to have an icon in charge of the show, because no matter who comes in to host it, it could be, you know, a 19-year-old pop star or a NFL quarterback or, you know, a Republican politician, like they all respect him. And I feel like it's very hard. He kind of is like NFL football, that everybody's like, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to be. So his brand is impossible to mirror. And I think that'll be the trickiest thing. But I also don't think he's going to go.
Had you not gone into comedy, what do you think you would have been doing?
I don't know. It's a really,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really sad how lucky
long
I
time
got.
ago, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, I went to college and was a radio, television, film major. So at least I knew at 18 something. Yeah. I would imagine, but I can't imagine what it would be if it wasn't comedy.
Right.
Yeah. Sad I did not develop other skills.
Well, good thing it worked out.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Another virtual question. Do you ever get nervous before shows anymore, or does that go away?
It definitely goes away at late nights, save for a David Letterman night. It's really great that the routine is the same. The studio's the same. It's my chair. At some point you can get used to anything.
Sure.
I still get nervous before I do stand-up. I think that's good. I think butterflies are good. I think it helps you focus. I still get nervous, when I host things. I guess the last big thing I hosted, which is a while now, but the Golden Globes, I was backstage sweating through my tuxedo.
How do you prepare? How do you deal with it? Do you have a process
I
of any
just
kind?
think, I mean, honest, it goes back to that thing where you had no other option,
Yeah,
right? And when
exactly.
they go, ladies
Just
and
do
gentlemen,
it.
Seth Meyers,
Yeah.
you realize
Here he
walking
is.
out and bombing is so much better than he's not coming out. Like, he's not coming out is like the end of your showbiz career. If like a stage manager's like, sorry guys, he really lost it. He's not gonna come out. We're just gonna go to the awards. But it's funny because I am the biggest gap between my perception of a thing and how it actually looks. And I don't often go back and watch myself do things. But, sometimes on Instagram, someone will post a joke from a thing I did at a Golden Globes. And all I can remember is the trying to talk over the pounding of my heart against. And the Golden Globes, too, of everything I've ever done, when you walk out, and the first three people you see are Spielberg, Hanks, and Oprah.
Right.
And so then you go, I can't look at them. And you look up, the next level are three equally famous people. And you're like, there's nowhere to look here. So those are the trippiest of the nights.
Got it.
Yeah.
Not our issue. Not our issue.
We have some other virtual questions, but anyone?
Anybody in the room? Elizabeth?
Hi, you talked about this earlier, but I was wondering if you could expand on this. Having been a head writer and a writer for many years, and now you have a team of, I think you said 14 writers, what did you learn about managing and motivating that team from your own experiences that you're translating now?
I think you want to give them room to follow their own instincts. And when they get it close, one of the most important things is never, and this is my producer for my show now, Mike Shoemaker, who was a producer at SNL when I became head writer. His thing was never give lateral pitches. By that, he means never pitch a joke just as good as theirs. They'll always like theirs more than yours that's just as good. So basically his thing was keep your mouth shut unless you can make it exponentially better. And because they'll only learn if it's theirs that succeeds or fails, and they will only feel proud of it if it's mostly theirs. Like that you can, if you jump in and make it a sort of shared success, that will not incentivize them as much as letting them have the win. And so that was the most important thing I found, both as a head writer and now, which is I got to be head writer at SNL during a really great era, of which I had very little to do with other than the fact that it was a super talented group of people, both on the writing side and the casting side. And because of that, people always come up to me and say, like, oh my God, the era you were head writer was great, which I'm very flattered by, but it's also, I just stayed out of the way, and I think sometimes that's more important than trying to flex your muscles and force them to put in a joke that you like. Because again, you can't teach people how to be funny. I'm certain of that, which is heartbreaking news
For not funny people.
Yeah, for not funny people. But you can you can send them out there with their work and hope that their antenna picks up the part of their work that's good and the part of their work that's not. And ultimately, that just requires like being a little bit more passive. It's weird that the right instinct is passive, but that's sometimes. With that said, I always held a pencil so it looked like I was working.
One more for Dora right here.
Can I ask another one? Is that allowed? Okay, I have another one. In terms of, oh my God, I just forgot my question. That's so mortifying.
Do you want me to talk about New York more?
You can talk about it. I'm a Midwestern. No, the question is really more about kind of, you talked earlier about Jon Stewart, right, and how he sort of, progressed into like a different arena.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your path, either in the future now in the impact space, where you're going in the impact space, or there are areas or causes that you care deeply about that you want to.
I don't know. I don't know if there's a certain area or cause other than just trying to be alert to what I feel are the biggest threats to the world we live in. And as far as the way, the show developed and the best way to address those is, of course, a monologue on a given night is 10 or 12 jokes. I do find like those 10 or 12 jokes, even when they're exceptionally written, don't quite have the same impact as when you do 12 minutes on a topic. And, the head writer for A Closer Look actually came from cable news, so he knows how to write in, setting up a thesis statement, making an argument, writing a conclusion. And it's so funny because when we started doing our show in 2014, I think the conventional wisdom on what was going to do the best the next day online were really short things, maybe musical, maybe game-based, maybe celebrity-based, all things that we were really bad at. Not that we didn't think they were good, we just were bad at doing them. And so we're so, pleasantly surprised by the fact that there is an audience for a 12-minute piece. And I think the reason there's an audience for it is that they can tell that we've not just written jokes, but sort of built this internal structure that can sort of bear the weight of the jokes. So that's the thing we sort of set out to do every day.
We have time for a couple more, maybe.
A virtual question. Does your wife ever ask you to stop telling her?
No, but I do have to give her all the money from it. That's the deal. It's more than fair. I will say that she is...
Anything off limits?
I think I
You know those boundaries.
I think I know,
Okay.
and I wouldn't dare step over them. She has done a great job over the years punching up jokes. Things that I think she's mad about, she'll say. First of all, it didn't happen that way. Second of all, if you're going to lie about it like that, at least say this. And, I'll give something else away about Lobby Baby, but because of the way we talked about my stand-up material, the last 5 minutes of Lobby Baby, it introduces, I'm now going to tell stand-up about me from my wife's perspective. And it was all based on the things that she had sort of said about me. And it was the day I figured it out, was the day I thought, oh, this is a special now. This isn't just an hour of jokes. This will, the same way that A Closer Look has a beginning, middle, and end, I thought, oh, now I got a closer. And she, I think, appreciated that at the end of the day, I'll tell it, I think more often than not, she appreciates too that I'm the butt of the jokes as opposed to her. The one thing she didn't want me to do in Lobby Baby was I said we're both terrible dancers. And she said, I don't want people to know that. And I said, they know.
But that first dance never happened.
No, the first dance, no, yeah, she got food poisoning on purpose, so we didn't have to do it.
It's an elegant way out.
Yeah.
Anybody else in there?
I think that, this is going to seem a little esoteric, that it is both surprising and makes perfect sense. It's almost like a math problem that no one saw coming, but then when they go back, it works. And yeah, so once a day, we all sort of say to each other, oh, that one's really good. Not one that I wrote, but, especially because we do so many jokes every day that when someone on our staff writes a joke that you didn't see coming that makes perfect sense. Someone wrote a joke today. We were talking about being catfished and talking about, oh, yeah, I got this new girlfriend in Vancouver. But it's been a real financial drain on me. I'm paying to get her Getty Image watermark tattoo removed. You know what I mean? You immediately go, fuck. You just it makes perfect sense. And then we show a hot girl with a Getty Image watermark. And so somebody wrote that today. And again, people have been doing jokes of I got a girlfriend in Canada forever. Yeah. That's almost hacky at this point. And so when somebody can do something that seems hacky, and so that was today's most perfect joke because it was surprising and it made perfect sense.
Alex.
It's a follow-on. So how many bad jokes or dad jokes do you have to go through before you find a perfect joke?
So great question. And one of the most fantastic improvements of the show post-COVID, we used to, every day at noon, all my monologue writers would come into my tiny office. And so it would be about 8 people, each of whom had written about 50 jokes. So I read through on paper 400 jokes with a highlighter. I would say I marked maybe 30. But it was humorless. The room was I read them so fast. They're all miserable. You can always tell which person's 50 you're on because they're the most. And then in COVID started, so my head writer Alex Bays, who was the head writer at Weekend Update when I was there, he's the greatest living joke writer for my money. He now just picks them. He just picks the 12 jokes, and it's so much better. But I would say it's 400 to get 12 every day. Now, with that said, Bays has also figured out a lot of those jokes are just page fillers, And he is very much like Joke Seth Can't Tell. It's an idea born of the reality of our show. So a few months ago, Bays started a new thing called Surprise Inspection. And the setup for Surprise Inspection is we think a lot of our writers sometimes just write jokes to fill the page, knowing that they'll never get picked and they'll never be on TV. But we're going to read them now and tell you their name and show you their picture. Which, of course, by the way, my writers are such egomaniacs. They're like, as long as my picture's on TV. But in the intro, my favorite joke of that is in the intro where Bays wrote, now, our writers don't know we're doing this. And since many of them don't watch the show, they'll never know. But yeah, so there's a lot of duds to get. And I should say, I never, even having done this show, even doing Update, I do feel as though I'm a good sketch writer. Writing jokes is a whole different thing. They have to be small, and I never could figure it out. So even though I'm throwing shade at my writers now, I can't. If I wrote 50, you wouldn't get even one. So
Maybe one more. Final question. Anybody in the room or online?
Thanks.
Who have been your fellow colleagues or other comedians that you've enjoyed working with over the years?
I mean, again, just I continue to sort of echo back to that era of SNL. But, my time with Amy Poehler, as nervous as I was at Weekend Update, it would have been so much worse if I wasn't with her. Her time at SNL, I've always said she was like the class president, the head cheerleader, the high school quarterback. She managed to have all of that in one. And there was a real team spirit under her, which I had heard historically was not the case at SNL. So I was very lucky to work there when she was there. And then, Bill and Fred and Andy, those are people that, John Mulaney is someone that I wrote with a ton. You realize the gift isn't just that you get to work with them. It's just when you step back, you realize how much better you got just from working with them because the standard comes up. And SNL, it's wonderful to watch people that talented succeed up close, but it's probably more helpful to watch them bomb up close. You know, every Wednesday at SNL, you read 40 sketches. You know, 8 make the show. You've watched the show. 3 are good. You know, 2 are fine, and 3 you're like, what were they doing this week? So watching the most talented people in the world, week in and week out, take these giant swings, and learning, you kind of can only learn what works from watching the same people fail, and so that was. I always say the education was, because again, you also you can watch them crush from home, but to watch them bomb, that's the real. That's when you find out how it works. Yeah.
Well, we're so appreciative that you did this, and it was a real treat. So thank you
you
so much, and thank you all for being with us.
Thanks, everybody.